To start moving our characters, we can observe the cause of movement within the humanoid frame, joints. Let's discover their function so we can design animation-ready characters. Be sure to leave me a like and let's get started. If you are looking for animation gear recommendations, check the description below to browse the parts to this ergonomic animation setup. At the base we have the FlexiSpot E7 Pro with a white frame with a solid wood top to support this ergonomic animation equipment. This desk features very fast response time when adjusting the height up and down, and of course your usual memory features for saving your favorite standing, sitting configurations for quick adjustment. The frame comes with adequate cable management options to keep things looking neat, and is also stable enough to draw digitally and traditionally at sitting and standing height. Special thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this tutorial so that you can watch it for free. Here's a discount for their fall sales event. Use the code YTE730 to get an extra $30 off the E7 Pro and E7. Don't forget to check out FlexiSpot's fall sale with up to 50% off discounts on their website, following the link below. Let's get back to the video. Alright, so here we have our simplified body mechanical puppet with the joints darkened. So we're just going to go over 3 joints to get sort of a simplified, broad understanding of how the body works. Each joint will allow a certain range of movement based on how it's shaped. So let's start with the first joint, ball and socket joint. And as the name entails, this joint is made up of a ball and a socket. So these are the 2 parts of this first joint, and this joint allows 360 range of motion. So where do we find our ball and socket joints on the body? Well, in this simplified mechanical puppet, we have one right here at the base of the neck that moves, that allows the head to go side to side like this, and it also allows the head to go front to back by a certain degree, right? We also have another one at the arm, right? At the arm, that allows our arm to do the same thing as the head. We can move it up. We can also move it down, abduction, adduction. And in the profile, we can also move this arm back and forth, can't we? Extension, flexion. Yep, so we have one for the 2 arms, and we also have the ball and socket joint on the legs. See, it's really a very common joint. So that allows us to do the same thing with our legs. We get a 360 degree of motion with the ball and socket joint, don't we? Now, this is severely simplified. We're not going to get the same range of motion with each of these ball and socket joints. Each have their own range, but for a simplified explanation, just for you to get sort of an idea of how the body mechanics work, you can pretty much summarize these as ball and socket joints. So I put them on the wrist as well. The wrist can flex upwards, right? We got the fingers and the thumb, right? And the other fingers in the back. So that's, in reality, that's not a ball and socket joint, but for animation purposes, simplifying it like this can help us a lot when it comes to exaggerating our timing, spacing. We can do the same thing for the body. I'm going to erase the rest of these notes, because we do have another ball and socket, and that's this one in the center here. Now, obviously, there's no, you're not an action figure. You don't have a giant ball and socket in the center right below your rib cage. But if we see it like this, we can actually understand that pretty easily, that this model can move from side to side across that ball and socket, right? And he can also move front to back. Now, it's worthy to note that your spine can move forwards much more than it can move backwards. I believe the spine rotation forwards, this is all rotation, no change in locations, is actually 90 degrees, and backwards somewhere around 30 degrees. So do your own research. I can't vouch for those numbers. I'm not an anatomist. We're not looking necessarily for accuracy here. We're just looking for a general relationship. So let's settle this here. So we have the ball. That's one piece. Then we have the socket that the ball fits into. Right? When you combine these, this is going to enable a range of motion. So we take this pivot point here, this ball and socket joint. It's not going to move like this in between the pivot points. This is incorrect. It's going to maintain its volume, and the range of motion is actually going to be a circle like this. Kind of demonstrated an ease in, ease out here. And now, since we're talking about humanoid mechanics, most of these movements are going to be in a speed up, slow down, or whatever you would like to call it, ease in, ease out. Okay, so we can do it in more 3D here. And our rib cage will be on this side, right? Here's our rib cage. We have the indentation that creates our socket inside of that rib cage. So the ball and socket can go anywhere onto this arm. 360 degrees of motion. Depending on how deep this rib cage, the ball is into the socket, the range of motion will be restricted, right? So this is at the two extremes, because this ball is deeply recessed in that socket. It can move all across here. But say we take the ball a little bit out of the socket, maybe do this over here, put the edge of it in there. Now we have a much wider range of motion. All right, I think you get the point. Just one last note before we go. The arms right here, these sockets, they have a larger range of motion than the legs, okay? So if I can erase all this, I'm gonna range of motion. If you want the exact degrees, you can do your own mechanics demo, or you can look them up online. They both have that ball and socket advantage of moving in 360 degrees, but the legs are more limited in their range of motion, okay? You can imagine that they're more deeply recessed, like how we talked about. Next type of joint, let's go to the profile view, talk about the hinge. That gives us this angle right here. How is the arm doing that? Well, it's because of this hinge right here. And the same thing with the legs, they're bending. They have a hinge right there. So what is the hinge? Just want to make sure to, before I go, we get all the points where we simplified our mechanical dummy with ball and socket joints. Give you a really nice basic understanding of how the head works. And I guess you could put one here at the base of the head if you really like to. Well, the hinge is a device, two pieces, two leaves, I believe they call them, connected by a pivot point. This is the pivot. And we got our two leaves to connect to it. Put this in a 2D view just for simpler understanding. What this allows us to do is move on one axis, rotate on one axis. Remember, it's an arc. We create the range of motion. Get the radius of this circle is going to be your range of motion. Up and down across that pivot point like a clock. Alright, so that allows this arm to bend upwards like so, and even further till we have no more space really. Bicep there. And the same thing for the knee. Allows you to kick your feet. And the last one we have is the pivot joint, which is basically just a wheel and an axle. Let's put it in 3D to make it look cool. Wheel plus an axle equals a pivot joint. This simple machine allows for rotation across one axis, or just in simple terms, you can spin it. Really, the only pivot points we have on our simplified full body model is right here, right at the forearms. And it's better if I demonstrate this separately. So basically, we have our ball and socket of the shoulder, and that comes down, makes a hinge right here. Kind of my simplified model of an arm. The main pivot point we have in our simplified mechanical skeleton is the radius. So we can imagine that that ring, that wheel is right here. We got the ulna right here, your bone. Now this is still, this is the ulna, and it's static. It still doesn't move. Then imagine next to that ulna has a curved edge right here, and there's a tiny wheel. This is our wheel. And this radius, that wheel allows this radius right here, which is why it's called the radius, because it moves, it rotates when you spin this wheel, spin it, spin, and it allows us to twist this this way. And when we do, I'm going to do this in green, we get the opposite. So the straight side now is going to be there, and the curved side is over here. The radius moves in a radial direction, so we just spun that. Now that puts our hand. Okay, so this is your palm right here, supination, supination, and then rotate your hand. This is pronation, pronation. This is the back of your hand where you can see all your knuckles. That's as a result of the pivot joint in your forearm. Special thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's animation tutorial, and also shout out to my patrons. Thank you for your loyal support over the years and your generous donations. For drawing lessons designed with the animator in mind, click the join button below and watch the first 2 installments of Drawing for Animators. Here is why I recommend organizing all of your animation knowledge. Check out this video.